Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I am thrilled and excited to introduce a very special guest today, Dr. Matt James. Dr. Matt is an international master trainer, lecturer, educator, and author. He is the president of Empowerment Incorporated, a firm that delivers personal transformation seminars and intensive trainings to thousands of students all across the world, including the US, Canada, Asia, and Europe, on topics such as NLP, mental and emotional release, and Huna, higher consciousness. He has a master's degree in organizational management and a PhD in integrative health psychology. Now, on a personal note, I had the privilege of attending one of Matt's trainings on ancient Hawaiian Huna, which you will learn more about today. And I had the honor of having him as my trainer. And I just have a tremendous amount of respect for you, Matt, because you not only have a tremendous amount of wisdom, but you really embody the principles that you teach, and you are living proof of their power. So welcome to our show today.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for having me on the show. And I'm really looking forward to this. You have such a great podcast and a wonderful interviewer. I got to watch a couple of your interviews and just absolutely amazing.
Thank you. So how about we kick it off with you sharing a little bit about your history, how you got into this incredible line of work?
I'm very fortunate. My father, his name is Tad James, and I got into it kind of by accident. You know, when you're a kid, you want to be like your dad. And when I was 5, I saw him meditating. And so I thought, cool, I want to do that too. And, you know, when I grew up as a kid, I felt so much energy. It was like, if at recess, I didn't go run around the playground, I was going to get in trouble. So my teacher would always say, you need to go run during recess. And at first I just wanted to meditate because I wanted to be like my dad. But actually what ended up happening for me was I felt a difference. I felt a difference in my mind, in my energy. And I started meditating. You know, I kind of always wanted to be like my dad. You know, he started doing NLP at an early age. I walked on fire. I did the Tony Robbins fire walk when I was 12. But I think more importantly than that is growing up in Hawaii, I got to learn from elders, as did my father. And he learned from a person named Papa Bray. In the 80s, he studied with him. His father was one of the last practicing kahunas in the Hawaiian Islands. And we have the fortune as a family to carry on that lineage. It goes back 28 generations unbroken into the Hawaiian culture. And we actually started teaching that back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, where I think this year we're doing our 63rd Huna workshop twice a year now for 32 and a half years in Kona. And Huna is a modern label for an ancient system of empowerment and flexibility of the mind, body, spirit. So it lines perfectly well with NLP. It lines up with, you know, mindfulness-based techniques. And in the Hawaiian culture, it was a holistic system of energy to mind to emotion to body. And there's this trickle down effect. And it lines up with everything that people are learning nowadays about the fact that what you have in your mind actually creates your reality, not the other way around. And so I've been studying it since I was a kid, and I started teaching back in 98. So I'm celebrating 23 years of teaching at this point. It's been a good journey.
That is extraordinary, and congratulations on that, because once again, as I said, and I know this from having been personally trained by you, that what you teach is embodied, not just by you, but by your team. And so I'm curious if you'd be willing to share a little bit more about what are some of the key assumptions that we have in Huna? What is it all about?
Of course. The actual word that you would want to use would be ho'omana. Now, I'm not asking you to say that, but people are familiar right now with this modern label that it's given. But ho'omana would have been what it was called in ancient times. Ho'o means to make, mana means energy, but you can't make energy. When you put those two words together, it means empowerment. That really it's the teachings of how do you be empowered. A lot of people have heard of the law of attraction, and you know the TV, the video, the Secret, books that have been published about it. And That's one of the laws. I think there's about 52 laws that we teach at Huna. That's one of them. And total transparency, I would teach that one last, because the reason why people who practice the law of attraction say that it works is because it works in an area where you are empowered. But a person can't just think thoughts and then all of a sudden everything's going to be okay. I've had people challenge me on that. Well, no, I practice the law of attraction, and all I have to think about is being more prosperous, and I am. You probably don't have a lot of baggage in that area. But before you would ever learn the law of attraction, you would have to learn other basic laws. The law of correspondence, that what you have in your mind, what you have within you, you actually project out onto the world around you. Carl Jung talked about this, that if you believe that the world is going to end because of everything going on right now, you actually will alter your perceptions and see things that lead to that. You would need to know about the law of cause and effect, that everything you do has a repercussion. The law of creation, the whole idea that the world exists in the form of dualities and that you have a little bit of a control over that. That's one of the techniques that you learned when you came and did Huna. There's the technique that we teach there to help people shift dichotomies that are out of harmony, shift dualities that are out of harmony. So these basic concepts were known in the Hawaiian culture. They were known. It was a basic idea that everything you see outside you is a reflection of what's going on inside, and vice versa, and that everything you do has some sort of result. So it's interesting, in Western society, we've gone so far away from these ancient teachings, and yet now people are craving them, wanting to bring them back.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And some of the people listening right now might be thinking, yeah, I want to create this change in my life, and and for some reason I just can't do it. I keep, self-sabotaging, or, one step forward, one step back. So what can you suggest to those individuals that might help them to either get unstuck or to move more deliberately towards what they want?
From the Hawaiian culture, there were 4 things that you had to do to create change in your life, and you need to do all 4. The first one is release work. The first one is, you could say ho'oku'u would be the Hawaiian word, or noa is to be free. And that's baggage release. That's letting go of negative emotions, limiting beliefs. There's a lot of techniques that help people do that, not just the ones that we teach, like mental and emotional release, journaling, letting it out, self-reflection. People have other techniques, cognitive behavioral therapy. And the first thing is release work. Now, a lot of people think at that point, okay, my world will be better if I just don't have the fear. That's one of the 4 things you have to do. The second thing is to have a goal. Well, the Hawaiian word would be pule, to put an intention out there. People have to have a direction. The third thing is to take action, to be able to take action on the path. The Hawaiian word imua, to move forward. And then the 4th thing is to focus. And focus means to have a positive focus, a focus on the light, a focus on the positive. Successful individuals actually do those 4 things in that order. What I found over the years of teaching is that unsuccessful people attempt to do it in reverse order. They try to fix their focus first rather than dealing with the baggage. And I love a simple analogy from physical health. If you're overweight or you're not in good health and you're afraid to even go into the gym, you'll never get into the gym. I mean, you might push yourself in January after you set your New Year's resolution, but eventually you'll back off. And so you got to let go of fear. But as soon as the fear is gone, you're still not in good shape. You have to set a goal. What are you going to eat? What exercises are you going to do? But after you set your goal, you still have not yet got healthy. So then you got to take action. You got to go into the gym. And sometimes weight doesn't come off right away. So you have to maintain your focus. And when I'm working with someone one-on-one, or when I'm teaching, I use that analogy because that's true for everything. With everything we have going on in the world, whether the economy is good, the economy is not good, successful individuals navigate it using those 4 principles right there. So let's talk a little bit about baggage. Some people may not have baggage. You look at successful individuals. I coach a person who is in real estate right now, runs one of the larger Keller Williams real estate teams. He has teams all across the country. And he doesn't have a lot of baggage when it comes to real estate. In fact, he's like, okay, with everything going on with COVID, with everything going on and people staying home, right now is a time for residential, at least in the areas where his team exists, where he sees that there's a whole bunch of prosperity there. He doesn't have a lot of baggage. Baggage isn't just emotional, though. It can be mental. It can be your beliefs. If you believe something, it actually perpetuates and puts it out there into the universe. Baggage can also be trapped energy, stuck energy. When you look at studies on Reiki or studies on Huna energy work, or even acupuncture, if you have a buildup of energy in an area of your body and there's an imbalance, what can occur is it can alter your perceptions of the world around you. If no one has any if I'm working with someone and they don't have any baggage, like my client, then I'm just like, what's your target? What's your goal? And it's surprising. A lot of unsuccessful individuals, you ask them, what is your goal? What is your target? They don't have an answer. They don't know. They know what they don't want. They know, I don't want this anymore, but they don't know what they do want. And so, yeah, if one of your listeners, someone who's watching this goes, I don't have a lot of fear right now, I don't have a lot of baggage, then you got to be really clear on what is your goal, because your goal will shift your reality. Having a goal, having a clear target, you begin to see the world differently because of that.
Thank you. And you mentioned this law of creation earlier. And what I recall from our trainings is that anytime we create a desire, if we will, we want something, we specify that it's meaningful and important to us, that the opposite is created as well. This kind of concept of duality. Would you be willing to share a little bit about what that actually means?
Of course. Yeah, of course. So the law of creation is an interesting law. And the idea behind it is that the universe as we know it is created based on dichotomies. Now, the word dichotomy or duality or opposite doesn't mean good or bad. It just means that for one thing to exist, an opposite has to exist. It's kind of like you on one side and the aspect that is not you on the other side. Jung called that the shadow. Day and night, they sit on either side of the seesaw, hot and cold. So there are some dualities like day and night or light and dark that, well, that's just pretty much how the universe is. There's not a lot you can do about that. And yet people also, through their upbringing, through their programming, they create a lot of their own dualities. So for example, I'll look out at an audience and I'll say, like, for example, good. And you'll have people say a bunch of different things. Some people will say bad. Some people will say evil. Some people will say great. Good and great can be a dichotomy, a duality. What people don't fully appreciate is that the dichotomies that we create in our life, these oppositions, there's got to be an energetic movement back and forth between them. I use the example when I would teach this of day and night. Where I'm from, there's not a lot of change between winter and summer. Everyone jokes around about Hawaii only having basically one season. It's summer, and we have a wet summer and a dry summer. It's really interesting because the sunset changes maybe 30 minutes throughout the year. Whereas when I was in California for a while, you get like a couple hour difference, or you go up even farther north. I remember one time I was in Scotland, and the sun is like up until 11 or 12. It's crazy. So in the winter, there is less sunlight, and so the cold gives off. And in the summer, there's more, so the heat gives off and it goes into the other side of it. So there's just like movement of an energy going back and forth. In a relationship, if you're in a relationship with your partner, there are times where you're putting in more energy and your partner's receiving. There are times where you're receiving more energy and your partner is giving. And so understanding these dichotomies in your life, it's really helpful. Some people are a night person. Some people are a morning person. Knowing when are you in your peak of energy, kind of like summer, a lot of energy, a lot of sun. And when are you in your winter? When are you kind of cooling off? And being able to learn about your dichotomies and even understanding them allows you to work with them rather than being worked by them.
It's almost like, when I think about this, I think of what am I moving towards and what am I moving away from?
Yes.
And so, for example, the weight example that you shared with us, yeah, so somebody might be moving towards losing weight, getting healthier, having more energy, but maybe they're moving away from feeling ashamed of how they look, maybe, or,
Correct.
things like that. Yeah. And so what's important about understanding the shadow, right, as well as what you're moving towards?
Mhm. Yeah, so the shadow is not a very complicated concept. Jung used the term of the shadow because, like the light that's on above my head, cast a shadow. There, I can see it in the background there. It cast a shadow. And so Jung is just like, you in your path, you're wanting to stand in your light. I mean, people want to stand in their light. They want to stand in their truth. And that's shining a light down on you. Well, that casts a shadow. And so Jung used the concept of the shadow to explain the aspect of your unconscious mind that stores the information that is not you. So in other words, for you to know who you are, you have to know who you're not. I love that you brought up the whole idea of negative motivators, a move away from, right? Some people want to get healthy because they want to live long and they want to, take care of their body and have great flexibility. Some people are motivated by the pain, though. Some people are motivated by the opposite of that they want to avoid pain. Maybe they had a low point with their physical health and that created a motivation. The problem is, from a dichotomy perspective, that if you have, as a part of what it is that you want to create, a positive and you want to avoid something, you end up having an energy flow back and forth between those two. I like to keep things really simple. So if you have, as a part of your goal, you want to be skinny and you don't want to be fat and you don't want to be obese, whatever term you want to use, you tend to actually then bounce back and forth between that. And you see people who have mixed results, or you see people who have up and down results. They lose some weight, they start feeling good, and then their health slides. And then they lose a little weight and their health slides. Or they build a little bit of wealth and then they lose a little bit of their wealth. They build wealth. It's because, as a part of the creation of your goal, because you have that duality in there, that I want to avoid this and I want to create this, you actually end up creating both. And people who are successful, and successful means they're getting the results that they want. They have a loving relationship. They have a great connection with their kids. They build wealth. They're doing well with their physical health. One thing that is really clear in studies of motivation and cognitive psychology is that they have positive motivators and they have less negative motivators. Unsuccessful people tend to have more negative motivators and actually end up manifesting them.
Which is why you started with saying, the first step is to release that baggage, if you will, because I imagine all that stuff that you're moving away from is related to some perhaps unconscious baggage, things from their past. Yeah. So, it's interesting because when you shared this incredible metaphor of kind of moving towards the light, what I was imagining is kind of as you move closer to light, the shadow behind you gets even bigger. So what if anything does that mean?
Yeah, I like that Jung used the term the shadow. Now, I wrote a book on this. My third book was Integrate the Shadow. And I put in the book that there are some people that teach shadow work and they say, there's the positive shadow, there's the dark shadow, Jung just used the term shadow. He kept it really simple. And so I have a son and a daughter, and my daughter's 14 now. I wasn't there when my son first saw his shadow, but I remember the day where my daughter first saw her shadow and she freaked out. I don't know. Kids, the first time they see their shadow and it's attached to their feet, they're like, they freak out. Jung used that term, the shadow, because when a person encounters their shadow, if they have a lot of baggage, it can scare them. Like if you feel that you're a good person and you encounter someone who's the opposite of that, and you meet them, it can be scary for you. The more personal growth work a person does, the less their shadow has a charge like that, the less the shadow creates that reaction. He actually used the term the shadow because most adults, by the time they get, into their middle school, their junior high, high school years, they don't even notice their shadow. Even if you're standing right in a big spotlight and your shadow's on the ground, it's gigantic, you don't notice it. And so metaphorically, that's kind of the goal. Now, people ask me a lot. They'll come in and take the training that you took, level 1 of Huna or an NLP training, and say, when do we work on the shadow? And I'm like, technically, every personal growth book that you've read that's helped you with your mindset, every training you've ever taken, you're actually doing shadow work, because when you work on you, it harmonizes or balances you up with your shadow. So in other words, it's kind of like this duality. The exploration of the shadow is if something out there creates a charge for you, whether it's political, whether it's what's going on with COVID right now. And I have some students that are like, what they're trying to do to us, and there's this hook, and their reaction is overboard. Then you got to work on you, because otherwise you'll project it out onto the world around you. As you become more harmonized, then it harmonizes your shadow, and you have less of an extreme reaction.
Yeah, thank you. And this brings to mind some of the things that I've learned as part of my work with HeartMath, the HeartMath Institute, which is that, sometimes we get into what's called overcare, where we care so much. Yes, what we're moving towards. I mean, we really care so much about it that, we start to feel some emotions that are depleting our energy. And so some of the techniques in HeartMath that we talk about is really about bringing compassion to those old imprints, really just kind of dissolving them into the compassion of the heart. So what does the heart and love, if I may use that word, have to do here with regards to helping to soften this shadow part of us?
Yeah, in the Hawaiian culture, the person that could trust their gut and operate from the heart was considered to be more intelligent than the person that could think things through. It was believed, the Hawaiian word, the na'au means your gut, your core. And the heart, I've always looked at the heart as kind of like the harmonizer, the balance between your gut and your mind. And it's from the teachings of Huna, it's where you want to be operating from. The word aloha means hello and goodbye. It also means love. It also means to greet and to leave with that positiveness. Aloha, the deeper teaching of aloha includes, operating from that. The heart center is the more powerful energy center. On a side note, I love teaching nowadays because, back in the 90s, didn't have the research and the science to back up all of these teachings. That they're able to measure the energy centers that people have now, and the heart center is the strongest of them. So Western society teaches us to come from our mind. It teaches us to come from logic and reason. And yet some of the most important things that we do in our life doesn't come from logic and reason. It comes from compassion. It comes from love. You see, what's the book? Oh, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, John Gottman. Amazing book on how to have a healthy relationship. And a lot of it boils down to emotional intelligence and the higher purpose connection that a couple has. When you look at people who are very successful with their wealth, very rarely are they just building wealth for the sake of money, because they want to do something with it. And if you ask enough questions, it comes down to a more heart-centered desire, whether it's to make a difference on the planet, to make a difference within their family. So having your heart in it, again, is pretty simple. It's, what do you love? What do you love? What do you enjoy that when you do it, your heart feels really good? Or what is it that you can take from your heart and put it into what you're doing, your career, even your physical health? It helps to then put that positiveness into it, and it helps the person to keep motivated and keep that energy moving towards creating their goals.
Thank you, Matt. And what's flowing through me right now is, curiosity. In ancient Hawaiian Huna, we speak of course, the unconscious mind, but also the higher conscious mind. And so, first of all, would you be kind of willing to introduce? I know this is in simple terms and we don't have very much time, but just a little bit of that concept of the higher conscious mind, and what does that and our unconscious mind have to do with what we're speaking about here? What roles do they play?
In almost every culture that you see, ancient cultures around the planet, they had the concept of a higher consciousness of your mind. Different people use different terms. In India, it was called the Atman, the Godhead with the individual. In Hawaiian, it was sometimes referred to as Aumakua. The Native Americans had that same concept. Then you get into modern psychology, you have people like Carl Jung that talks about the true self, the self with a capital S. And the books that were released after he had passed away clearly show that he saw the mind as being about three different aspects. So three different ways of looking at the mind. So from Huna, you have one consciousness, that's you, and it's along a spectrum. So rather than thinking you have three minds, it's more along a spectrum. Psychology says more along the lines of three minds if you go into Jungian psychology. So you have your conscious mind, and that's who you think you are. That's your self-awareness. You have the unconscious mind, which some people refer to as the subconscious, where your memories are, where your emotions are. The unconscious mind runs your body, it preserves your body. And a lot of personal growth work, including like neuro-linguistic programming, they really focus in on how do you get to know your unconscious mind a little bit better, because that's where your learnings are stored, your emotions are, your baggage, your beliefs, those are in the unconscious. More spiritual teachings talk about higher consciousness. It's the higher vibration of your mind. And that's where you really get into a lot of work around purpose. So higher conscious mind is more about your purpose. Some people would refer to it as your dharma, or some people would refer to it as your, true self. That's what Jung referred to it as. And the higher self is meant from a spiritual teaching to be a guide for you, to be something that guides you. And Huna, in simplistic terms, is that when you're standing in your light, you're actually standing with your purpose, which a fancy way of saying it is your higher self is present. You feel like you're guided by a higher purpose. Going back to John Gottman's book, John Gottman's a researcher. He's a doctor. And when he first started publishing his work, he got a little bit of pushback, because back in the day in psychology, if you mention spirit, if you mention religion, that's not psychology. That you got to leave that aside. Nowadays, they're way more open to it. And some people pushed back with Gottman and said, one of your 7 principles is for the relationship to have a higher purpose, a connection to spirit. And he said, I can only tell you the data points that the most successful couples have a higher purpose. So you also see that with enlightened entrepreneurs. They're not just out there building wealth. Leaders of companies, major organizations, it's like they feel like they have a bigger purpose than just making another gadget or running another event. It's as if they're standing in their purpose, their light, and that's higher self. So again, you know me, I like to simplify things. You can do meditations like what we do, call your higher self. And really, when you're like, this is who I am, and this is my purpose for doing what I do. When you do that, you're standing in the light of your higher self. And that automatically brings in that level of consciousness.
Thank you, Matt. And there are, I imagine, so many people listening to you right now and saying, I so deeply want to know what my purpose is. Mm-hmm. I've been living this life doing the best that I can. And, I find joy in what I can, but I'm just so curious to know what else there is out there for me. What might you suggest to those individuals, at least as a starting point, to connect with that higher purpose?
It's an amazing question that, I started teaching in the 90s, and I was in my 20s, and everyone in the room was older than I was. And it was really weird. It was really weird to be in my 20s teaching. And obviously, as I've gotten older, I look out at the audience, and now there's people my age and even younger in there. I again, this could be my own belief. It could have been my own moment, my own projection. I would see people begin to ask, what's my purpose, when they would get into their late 30s, early 40s. And you see way more young adults and even kids now that are like, I don't want to just work in corporate. I want to do something that makes a difference. It's like you hear a lot more people asking, what is my purpose? What is the thing that's going to bring me true fulfillment? There are three basic energies. This comes from physics, quantum physics. It comes from almost every spiritual teaching. There's the energy of creation, the energy of transformation, and the energy of completion. And those three energies, you can cycle things through it. This building, when it was built, that's the energy of creation. Now it's going through transformation, the paint deteriorating, the cement drying. At some point, they'll tear it down. That's completion energy, which creates a whole new cycle. Now, that relates actually to how a person gets more in touch with their purpose. In Western society, we teach people to go for completion energy. Completion energy is related to having. So having a house, having a car, having a degree. And we tell people in Western society, not everyone, a lot of people tell, their kids or their friends, well, if you have a car, if you have the right house, if you have the right job, if you have the right degree, you'll be happy. And some people will go to have, and many people are waking up from that and going, I've had the car, I've had the house. I want to do something. I want to do something that's meaningful. So then they start doing different things. Doing is related to transformation energy. They'll do different jobs. They'll do different careers. They'll do different trainings. And some people are waking up from that and going, we're not human havings. We're not human doings. We're human beings. Being is creation energy. So when I'm helping someone figure out what is your purpose, it begins with, who are you? Like, who are you meant to be? Now, how do you discover who you're meant to be? It depends on what technique you use, right? If it's a spiritual technique, meditate on the beach until you figure it out and your higher self starts talking to you. If you're using NLP, it's learn all of your values and what are your life values and what are the most important ones. And that tells you who you are. If it's cognitive psychology, it's self-reflection, it's looking inside of yourself. So all of these approaches, they all work. I like looking at it from a more NLP perspective, oddly enough. As much as I love Huna, I think everything I teach is Huna, actually. NLP teaches you, what are your values? What's important to you about life? Get that list. You pour out what is the most important things, you put it in order, and that gives you a snapshot of who you are, of who you're meant to be. If your number one life value is spirituality, you have to learn how to bring what you do from a spiritual perspective into everything you do. If your number two value is fun, you have to have a way of finding fun and bringing that into everything you do. So I think that's a pretty easy way of doing it. It's your life values. You ask yourself, what's important to you about life? And those words aren't just words for you. They're a deeper level meaning of, this is who I am. Once you discover who you are, then it goes into the doing energy. What do you begin to do based on who you are? And then manifestation becomes really, really simple. You have effortless manifestation when you're on your path, when it flows from who you are to what you're meant to do into the things that you have. So I know that was a really long answer. Purpose is a question that I get a lot, though. And so I appreciate you asking that.
Well, you answered it actually beautifully, because you gave us different perspectives and you gave us a specific tool, a question that we can ask ourselves, what is most important to me about life? And then, as you said, putting it into some hierarchy, what's number one, what's number 2, 3, and 4, and so on. And what's really cool, and kind of to loop this back to how we started our conversation, is that, perhaps even before we get into the doing, is to kind of pause and say, okay, let's say I value fun, as you said, let's say that's the second value. Am I moving towards fun, Or am I more moving away from the fact that I haven't had enough fun in my life? Maybe I've been
Correct.
bored. Maybe I haven't been challenged enough. And so kind of to tune in and say, where am I, what it feels more resonating for me right now? And if there's something around, well, some beliefs about not having fun or anything like that, or some emotions maybe around that, then it's an opportunity to look at that, as you said.
Yeah. I have one of my clients. She's an amazing individual, and she was starting to feel burnt out. And she lives her purpose. She has a company. She works with women's groups, helping them with empowerment. And, she's got a huge following and great community, amazing leader. And with everything that has been going on in the world, with COVID and everything that has happened, she's been going nonstop for the past year. And it finally hit her. I'm coaching her one-on-one, and I'm finally like, look, you're successful, you're go, go, go. You got to go have some fun. Like, one of her top life values is fun and just having joy. And although she loves what she does and she loves to teach and she loves doing her own podcasts and whatnot, she just hadn't had any fun. So she went down to, I can't remember where she went. It was like the Bahamas or Costa Rica or something. And she's like, I danced. She goes, I haven't danced for a year. And she came back and she sounds like a different person. And I reminded her, I'm like, these life values that you have, they need to be nurtured. When my other client relationship, his one-on-one intimate relationship is higher up than his career. And any time in his life, when he's put his relationship on the back burner, his career actually begins to suffer. And I'm like, look, it's a really simple formula. If you look at your life values, and your kids come before career and your relationship comes before career, if you want to be successful in your career, you have to also bring in that success in your relationship and with your kids. There's a great book called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And most people read it and they go, yeah, okay, it makes sense. If you work out every day, you're eventually going to be healthy. If you eat right every day, you're going to, so like the little things that you do. There was something deeper in that book for me, because Jeff talked about the fact that people who become successful, they have a formula. He calls it their philosophy, like your personal philosophy, a little bit different than values, what we just talked about. He said the interesting thing is that often when someone becomes successful, they don't think that they need to adhere to their philosophy anymore. They don't need to adhere to the basic things. And he said, and then when people do that, they lose their wealth, they lose their momentum. I suffered from that. I did. I had a relationship, about getting close to a decade now, a decade ago, end. I had a 14-year marriage end. And when I first got together with her, and we're both awesome. I mean, we're both friends, we co-parent, we actually can be around each other. We like being around each other. We're both done. Like we're never going to be together again. She's an amazing woman. And what happened was, when we first got together, we always made time for us, downtime, fun time. And I walked away from that. She walked away from it, because you become successful and you're like, oh, we don't have time to go to the beach this weekend. We don't have time to do a relationship vacation. Oh, now we have kids. Now everything's about the kids. And walking away from that, that's the formula that helped me to become successful. So after I read the book, I sat back and I went, wow, powerful lesson. The relationship had already been gone for a while. I'm like, okay, this is my philosophy. I'm going to take downtime. I'm going to, spend time with the kids, and I'm going to prioritize things differently, because that's who I am. So it's like, think of your philosophy as how you're going to show up every day. Some of my values are in there. Some of my life values are in there. And just how do you want to show up every day? And when you adhere to that, it's kind of like it gives you that doing energy, like what you said. So once you know who you are from a values perspective, your philosophy is a little bit how you do things, how you show up.
And it's interesting, because then this goes to that fourth step that you talked about at the beginning around focus, staying focused on those things that are most important to you.
It's focusing in on the positive. It's, people look in the mirror, and rather than going, oh, you look great, or your hair is, you look for the flaws. People, rather than looking at a situation and going, how amazing this is. They look at the situation and go, how awful it is. One of my students took these teachings so much to heart. And you ask him about this past year with COVID. He's a restaurant owner. He's a self-made, millionaire, very successful. And he's like, this has been the best year of my life. He said, because I went out there and I got to go on vacations where hotels were completely empty and it was just me. And he's like, I found places to go to and I found the love of my life. He's like, this has been the best time. And he goes, and I have people who own restaurants in the same areas that I do that have either shut down, that the world is going to hell, that no one's ever going to, he's like, but yet my restaurant's doing fine. And it's right next door to this other restaurant. And he's like, the difference is so powerful when you know who you are, you know what your daily philosophy is, and you're going for those goals and you're taking action. It's actually easier to then focus in on the positive and find the silver lining in things and find the positiveness.
Yeah, and build that momentum, as you said,
Yep.
momentum towards change rather than momentum, running away from what we don't want. Matt, with a heart full of gratitude, I want you to know that one of the most transformational experiences that I have ever had, and I've done all types of trainings and personal development, happened at your training. It was when we were doing the Kiave process. I had the privilege to do that with Deanne, and it took no more than probably about 7 or 8 minutes, and it completely transformed my life. There was a very strong limiting belief that I had, and it was something that was very active in my life at that moment, right? Things tend to happen that way, right? When we're ready to release something, help seems to show up. And in that short period of time, I was able to completely transform my thoughts about that and how I felt about that. And no more than about 45 minutes later, I got a call that was completely unexpected and gave me immediate proof that something I did on the inside, I mean, I felt it, but also had some effect on the outside. And I'm so deeply, with all my heart, grateful to you and for Deanne. And the process that we did, without getting into the process itself, it had to do with those dichotomies, with really seeing the shadow, if you will, and being with it and loving all the parts.
It's a powerful technique. And, there's a bunch of different techniques. I know you've done so many trainings, you know me, I teach NLP and I teach Huna. And, the amazing thing is that there are so many techniques like that can help shift your perspective on something. And if any of your listeners have done an NLP training, the Calvi process is similar to parts integration. It affects so at the deeper level of the unconscious. It works with dichotomies. And you're right, people, it's like one of my clients felt like there was an opposition between her and her father. And even though her father's passed away, in her mind, it was like, my dad made me who I am today. He would always push, and she would still feel it, even though he's no longer around, even though he's passed away. So I took her through the Kiave process. And the idea here is that, yes, your father may have pushed you, and yet I can find someone else. In fact, her sister had a totally different opinion of how their dad was, that the pushing was actually encouragement, that the pushing was, helping her become the woman that she is today. So you have these sisters, that both look at the dad a different way. That's the whole idea of the shadow. It's, yes, there are behaviors. You can look at the fact that, okay, well, your dad raised his voice at you and he was yelling. Yet you get to choose how you interpret that. And I found people, through my travels, through teaching, through working with clients one-on-one, that their dad yelled at them and they loved it. And some people, their dad yelled at them and it made them feel like they were broken inside. Well, the difference is in your mind. And that's the baggage release. The Kiave process is a very powerful technique to release a dichotomy that's out of harmony. And I love that you got an instant experience of it shifting, because when you shift inside, the universe responds. People will feel it energetically. They will pick up on it. And I've heard that so many times. After doing a technique, your phone rings or you bump into someone and it's just, you're like, okay, that worked. I'm a different person now. And therefore they're a different person.
It's just a really wonderful gift, I think, to everybody listening, that these tools, these processes are out there for us. We really don't have to suffer. For those people that feel there's a part in their life that they're not quite yet fulfilled around, or maybe they've set a conscious goal, but they're not quite able yet to achieve it, there is help out there. And so would you be willing to share, Matt, how they can access that help with you and your company and all the wonderful trainers that you work with?
Of course. We love to, whatever we can do to help people. During COVID, you're a trainer of NLP, so swish pattern. Swish pattern is to get rid of a unwanted behavior that you have. And I'm like, people just got to stop touching their face. So we put it out on our app for free. We're like, do this and stop touching your face. And we love to help out like that. There's a anxiety release technique. We have an app. If you type in I think if you just type in NLP on an Android, on a iPhone, we have an app that has some free techniques. Ho'oponopono is on there, the forgiveness process. There is a level where you can, like, membership, where you can, we have hundreds of hours of recordings of content from trainings, from podcasts and whatnot. Also our live events. NLP.com is the easiest way to check it out. I think all of our links for the books that I've written, and even our live events. We're actually running an event right now, which I'm obviously not at. We're in Los Angeles. And I think we run about 20 something practitioner trainings all around the country during the year. So there's just a lot of information that we have that we put out there, and NLP.com is the easiest place to start.
Thank you, Matt. And I can attest to the fact that everything you put out is of the highest quality. And I share it. I just shared this week twice, the Ho'oponopono 7-minute video with 2 of my clients. So it is extraordinary stuff, and it is available to whoever wants to check it out, and of course to engage further if that's the right fit for them. So once again, thank you, Matt.
Thank you so very much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, a huge honor for me and for our listeners. Thank you.
Welcome.